During the summer of 2019, I took a graduate school class at the Breadloaf School of English in Vermont taught by Brenda Brueggemann called Narrative and Documentary in Disability, Disease, and Illness, or How to Tell a True Good Crip Story. Brenda mentioned that our class was very much an exploratory endeavor in figuring out together what moves are being made, what critical bandwidth and baggage do we have around how disability studies works, and what has maybe shifted or changed in the 25 to 30 years of disability studies as a field. I selected to take this course because I was interested in learning more about who tells narratives and stories about disability and how people tell these narratives and stories and for what purposes. Andrea Lunsford writes that it is important for us to examine and challenge narratives and stories that crush dreams, choke freedoms, and leave people voiceless. Instead, we should pursue what she calls narrative justice. As the niece of an aunt with Down syndrome and someone who has spent the last 10 years teaching special education, I entered this graduate class with many prior experiences with certain types of disabilities. However, I knew there was more to know, more to think about, and more to question. I came to this class with a deep interest and curiosity in the particular ways narratives about my own students and family members have been shaped and constructed by myself, other people, and institutions like schools and hospitals. On day one of class, Brenda asked us to think about the following question. What are some things that come to your mind about what would make a good or true or right or interesting disability narrative? Prior to engaging with our course texts and documentaries, my professor, my classmates, and I generated many responses to this question. My classmate Emily said, a good disability narrative is honest, but also draws on a universal experience and intersection with the outer world. EB, another classmate, stated, I think a good disability narrative needs to be mundane because it needs to explore what's universally human. Mary emphasized that a good disability narrative is inclusive of multiple identities. Having people in my family with disabilities, that's one of the parts that we don't always get to see. The multiple sides because we're so concerned with the immediate. Our professor, Brenda, said good disability narratives are about turning it sideways, mixed up with other identities. It's never only just about disability, but disability is reflected also through all the other identities of a person. The disability story is in relation. I mean who you are, identity, the people you're around, any moment, day, and context as well. My classmate Tasia thought about author's perspective. Tasia noted that as an author, there has to be sort of a willingness to open up your story to other people and sort of a willingness to allow them to interpret it in their own way. Emily said, it is important to get the real story, the reality of what it means to be disabled, but also the internal experience, the external and the internal, and how you know there can be a whole other persona within. Veronica, my other classmate, thought back to other literature she has read or taught. She asked, how can you tell a story feels true and that it's about the person with the disability and not necessarily about the disability? In literature, disability is often a symbol for something else, that you have a character who's blind, and the blindness, it's supposed to mean something, and that felt less true to me. Sarah observed that good disability narratives have a high amount of sensory detail, and how important that is to conveying, creating a community of communication. Adia felt that a good disability story offers a candid presentation. They said, I think these stories need to be created or produced by people who are also disabled, instead of someone who has access to a television station and wants to present the voices of the unheard in a weird savior-like way. I noted that disability stories do not just have to focus on overcoming adversity, and they don't have to be just straight up text either. People can tell stories in multiple modes and ways. My classmate Chris noted that what we ultimately need to pay attention to when evaluating disability narratives is truth for whom or true to whom. After reading texts in class, such as Jay Dolmash's chapter on Metis and Arthur W. Frank's book, The Wounded Storyteller, I felt that I developed more specific frameworks and perspectives for understanding narratives and documentaries about disability, illness, and disease. These skills were personally lacking for me before I entered this class. The restitution narrative, the chaos narrative, the quest narrative, body relatedness, other relatedness, desire, control and contingency, embodied testimony, and metis were all novel concepts to me. Therefore, the power of this class and the people I shared it with was that it gave me new frameworks and models for talking and thinking about disability in my personal and professional settings. Frameworks and models that I can share with my colleagues. It also allowed me to zoom out from my day-to-day contact with disability in school settings, as defined by the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, IDEA, and think about disability and illness more expansively and collectively, even for disabilities not defined or outlined under this legislation. As I reflected about this class, I contemplated how I could bring these ideas back to other teachers in my school and community. My school has focused much of its professional development and teaching approaches around culturally relevant pedagogy and anti-racist work, which has been necessary and transformative for our students and staff. However, I have often wondered how we as educators can thoughtfully start having similar trainings and dialogue around disability. For example, what ableist structures do we uphold and perpetuate in our schools? Are the practices and activities we use in our classrooms and the overemphasis on standardized testing a reflection of the value we place on the productivity of our students' minds and bodies? How can we set a tone for our students of embracing the beauty of our fluid abilities? How can we reimagine ideas about productivity? How are the comments we make about students and the viewpoints we have about students a symptom of dominant narratives about disability and illness that we have consumed and internalized ourselves? How do we think about mainstreaming and inclusion for students with disabilities without stripping away that individuals' experiences for identity, without them feeling isolated and getting lost and drowning in the stream? Or, as C.C. Bell says in her book El Defo, without them feeling lost, drifting along on their own planets. I plan to apply what I have learned from the narrative and documentary in disability, disease, and illness course and develop a professional learning community for teachers at my school or in my area during the upcoming school year. The professional learning community will focus on disability and its relation to our work with students. This is an area of teacher learning with a growing demand, yet where few opportunities are prioritized and exist. Some of the topics we plan to discuss are disability narrative frameworks, the ableist structures in our school settings, and the intersectionality of disability in schools with regard to race, gender, and sexuality. This learning community will be as adaptive, exploratory, and interactive as my summer class was, incorporating different pedagogical strategies and tools like acting, movement, and visual activities so that teachers can use these with their students.